go live. Everybody ready to go live? We're going live. You're live, it says. Okay. Just give me one moment, please, just to check. And yes, we are live. Okay.
Okay, call the meeting to order at 9:03. First is the adoption of the agenda. Any additions, Bert?
No additions to the agenda. We don't have a delegation today, and we do not have a section under the in committee. So if there is anything that anyone wanted to add there, we certainly could. And there's nothing else that I have to add unless any of the committee members do.
Anybody from the committee?
No. I'll make the motion that the Economic Development Committee adopt the minutes of the June 28th, 2022 meeting as present.
Any questions? All questions? All in favor? So passed. Next is adoption of the minutes for the June 28th, 2022 minutes.
Oh, sorry, just offer a correction. I think that's one you,
I'm
Yes.
sorry.
you just said. So.
I just wanted to adopt the
Yeah.
agenda for today.
Okay, so if that's the case, then I
Yeah.
can make a move that we adopt the agenda,
Okay.
and we'll just do it.
There are minutes for you.
He did the minutes.
We've already adopted the minutes.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay, I thought you were just gonna, okay.
You just read
So we stepped ahead of Bruce here.
Yeah,
Sorry about that. So
we're a little rusty.
We're just checking everybody's awake.
Getting the summer fuzz out.
Thanks,
Okay, you
Patricia.
got that, Bert?
I
I
think
heard you
I
say
have it
minutes,
figured
and
out
I
now.
thought, oh,
So,
Bert will just
we
change
have
it to agenda.
Patricia motioning to adopt the agenda, and then Peter motioning to adopt the minutes. Correct?
Yeah, that's it.
Good. With that, we'll go to 3.1 with, oh no, we did that already. Okay, next is 5.1. Take it away, Bert.
All right. So earlier this year, the newly elected council passed a updated and very well, I think, thought out strategic plan. We had a pretty intense internal process that we went through with both council and staff, and generated a fair bit of feedback to come up with the strategic plan 2022 to 2025. So that document is included, and this, of course, is the main plan that is going to govern the direction of the county over the course of the next 3 years. In addition, we have the tactical business plan, and the tactical business plan is also included. So to give the overview, the changes in this plan compared to the one that was previous to it, and that plan is still available on the county website as well. Economic development is still there as one of the pillars. Strategic economic development, and then we have also added in tourism. So strategic economic development and tourism is the focus and is one of the main buckets for council. And then under that, we have the 4 main points, and coming out of those 4 main points are a number of operational things to do laid out over the next 3 years in the tactical business plan. So all of the information is there and is summarized in front of you, but what I did want to highlight was just a couple of things. Because there was, as I mentioned, sort of considerable time and effort put by council and staff as we were developing things. So On the mission statement, we're a diverse and welcoming rural community that strives to provide exceptional opportunities for our families, businesses, and industries for the benefit of current and future generations. That gives excellent guidance, and I have to admit, there's been a number of investment clients that I've worked with that's actually been the foundational statement that I bring us back to. We'll often get some open-ended questions that things are like, well, what's the county all about, blah, 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 right? And so there's different questions like that come from potential investors. And so I've actually started to use this as kind of my pat answer. And it tends to really give some solid direction and a good summary, and is generally really, really well received. And I don't always quote it as the mission statement. I sometimes just pull portions of it out, but it's given us a good solid answer to be able to pull back on, or to lean back on, and by being able to use it, it helps us to reinforce it, and that kind of thing as well as gives kind of some clear direction and some clear background. Under the core values, we have them all listed there, but I think that, you know, the ones that, if we look out to the broader world today in the news and that kind of thing, the natural resources, the integrity, transparency, diversity, all of those things, and of course under the economic development part of it, the collaborative piece is a really big part of it as we reach out to our surrounding businesses and business communities. So I think that council has done a wonderful job of kind of encapsulating and putting all of those things in together. You can see that we have really the 5 main strategies and goals, with strategic economic development and tourism being one of the 5. And then as we get into it, so on to page 19 of the meeting package, page 9 of the strategic plan, there are kind of the 4 main points underneath the strategic economic development and tourism: to partner with local business associations and regional neighbors to identify and pursue new economic opportunities in industry, business, and tourism; to cooperatively market with our economic partners our opportunities, tourism, and recreation assets; to expedite the implementation of high-speed internet for our residents and businesses; and to promote and showcase our recreation and tourism locations within the county. So in theory, all of the activities that we're doing for economic development should be able to come back to one of those 4 pillars. And often we can do a very direct trace back. Sometimes it might be a little bit more convoluted. Sometimes the categories might fit under, or an item might fit under 2 or 3 of those things. But that really is kind of the guidance that we've been given. So I'll stop there just for a second to see if anyone has any questions or any comments on that part of it and for what council has laid out for us so far.
Go ahead, Patricia.
I actually have a bunch of comments on the tactical plan, so I don't know if you want me to start now and put it all together.
Let me do a tactical plan summary right after this.
Okay.
That's why I wanted to stop here, because I wanted to kind of break it into 2 parts, but thank you for that.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, through the chair to Bert, one of the things that was interesting when I came back from the Regional Economic Development meeting we had in St. Albert was I went back to this tactical plan because I tried to understand a little bit better what the consultants were telling us, why we had to reestablish what the Rural Economic Development Association's growth is about, because growth fails miserably in the old format. And so when I went back to this, it became really simple, is that we have to, as a Regional Economic Development Association, align our projects based on what other municipalities' strategic plans are. And that really opened my eyes, is that's why growth has to be completely reconfigured. And so, you have to appreciate the work that the council and the admin put into this.
Geez, you're all excited and ready to go. Are you guys started?
CAO Frank wanted to stop by to say hello this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Martin?
Is the reef here? Is this?
No.
No.
No, we don't have the review this
You
morning.
guys started at 9:30, right?
Hi.
Where you guys started?
Yes,
Yeah.
we are live.
Oh,
And thank
Okay.
you for joining us.
Thank you. I know that I'm embarrassed.
No need to be embarrassed, it's just
Say it
exciting
right
to
as
have you here, Gordon.
I thought it was at 9:30. I apologize,
No.
Mr. Chairman.
Forgiven.
Okay.
Thank you for stopping by, Gord.
So that's one of the things that I found very interesting is that a lot of the municipalities don't understand that we have to know what their strategic plan is, what they expect of Economic Development Association, and how we are going to implement. And this is solid. And so I appreciate the fact that, you know, now I'm able to connect those dots a little bit better.
Just a comment, from the time that I started on the Economic Development Committee to now, when I started, these were very vague, if a lot of it non-existent. So I think in 4 years, kudos to all people involved in the development, and it's precise, solid. And with the tactical plan, I think it will, narrow focus, so there's less error and confusion for future councils and economic committees. This is, because I know when I started, it was just like, I didn't understand what we were doing because there was nothing written. So thank you very much from a citizen and from a committee member.
Well, the process to do this plan was a 2-day process. We had 2 mediators, or whatever you want to call them. And it was pretty in-depth and
It
it
needed,
was very well done.
yeah. No, it was good, much better than.
Okay, so to proceed then to the tactical business planning, and thank you everyone for all of those comments. It is, it's liberating and empowering as an employee to be able to have something like this to stand on when we're asked questions or when we're going to do something. One of the significant changes that happened from the last strategic plan to this one is we haven't identified directly in this plan labor force development, labor recruitment, all of that. We know that that is a very significant part of what we need to do, but going through the process that we did is, as our chair mentioned, that didn't bubble to the top. So it isn't that it isn't on the list, and it isn't that it isn't thought of. It's just that when we look at, given the resources we have and the priorities that have been set, if we have the opportunity to do it, great, but it isn't the immediate priority. And if there are things, and the point that I like, the most I think is the first one, because partner with local business associations and regional neighbors to identify and pursue new economic opportunities in industry, businesses, and tourism. So that statement, if we find that we are in the middle of a massive labor shortage and we know that labor becomes an issue, well, there's the opportunity within industry, business, and tourism that we know we need to pursue. So we have the opportunity to use that to kind of open things up if we need to, but the plan as it is laid out and the tactical plan as it is laid out, labor force development and recruitment isn't one of those pillars or one of those main points at the moment.
Okay.
Okay, so this is gonna be a little bit, I went through with the point by point for just specifically the items for the ECDEV, either the EDO or the ECDEV committee.
And thank you for doing that. That is exactly what I had kind of wanted to get to today.
So what the comments that I have, so starting with 41C, best practices, research on ECDEV strategies with municipalities of a similar size and nature, and inside and outside of Alberta. Okay, well, actually, when I went through from the last meeting, one of the things that I had noted in going back and watching our own video from our last meeting is I would like to make a motion that we direct the EDO to find out other municipalities that have their EDC meetings online and watch one meeting a month and come back to us with notes from that meeting, some highlights, to see what other organizations are doing and how that can benefit our organization. So I think that that might be a way of learning on the shoulders of other EDCs that are doing well, and that we can take that without having to, you know, explore the pitfalls on our own. We can build bridges with their knowledge. So that's the first thing that I'd like to put forward as a motion.
Okay, motion's accepted.
Sorry, I'm writing the motion out. Did you want me to provide a commentary? Because I think it's a wonderful idea.
For anybody else's discussion on that?
Any discussions on the motion?
Yeah, I think you're, we're gonna open a whole, can of worms, if you wanna put it that way, which is good. Because, what's really interesting is that what Alicia said earlier, and what you're asking for is, this is a struggle every economic development committee is having. And so we're going to probably find out that there's a lot of us that are sitting around these tables that are not only new, but at this game, but that are going to, by that question being asked, is going to discover, you know, some of the direction that we're going to take. So I think it's a really good way, because I think that's what we're discovering at Growth as well, is that there's a lot of regional economic development organizations that are purely there and getting funding, but really are doing nothing because they don't know how to go about it. And so that's, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's really a good idea.
Only comment. I think it'll also tell us where we're at compared to other groups. Like, we may be doing a great job, we may be below average too, so it'll give us a standing where we are.
And in that light, sorry.
No, just in reference to some other meetings, Bert has commented, is it a conference that you go to or something where, I remember there was a report with all what other counties were doing, and at that time, there was kind of a comparison at that. Do you not meet with or have network meetings already?
We had in the past,
Okay.
with the reformation within the Ministry for Jobs, Economy and Innovation. We haven't done one in the last little while. We are working with both, and this is where we really need to make sure we have excellent relationships developed with all of our provincial government and federal government local contacts. Because with both JEI and with Prairies Can, what we're trying to do is to put together some kind of a quarterly, maybe twice a year, sort of regional update meeting and confab is probably the best way to describe it, where everybody does a bit of a roundtable and all that. That was also one of the key things that had come out of some of the recent growth discussions as well, is that at our growth meetings, we need to have not just the elected officials from those municipalities, but we need to have the ECDEV staff, we need to have the provincial and the regional economic development staff. If possible, and we can do it, why not have somebody from Invest Alberta or Invest Canada there as well, right? The more resources we can put around the RETA table to help municipalities understand what is there to assist with economic development, the more powerful we all are. And so that is something that we kind of lost it through the reorganization and through the pandemic a bit, but I've had really good conversations recently, both with Nicole Nellis, who is our local rep with Jobs, Economy, and Innovation, and with Cami Curry. And I know for both of them, it's on their radar on what can we do to put something together. I estimate it's probably going to come back in some way through the RETA, or have at least a RETA component to it. But yeah, we're in the process, and I'm hoping to be able to do a meeting like that sometime this fall.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, through the chair, and that's to the members of this board, what's really interesting is that our biggest challenge is going to be a lot of these municipalities don't have EDOs that anchor these committees. And that is a huge problem because for us, because we will not be able to advocate through an EDO. It'll have to be advocating through people who are just like ourselves, who are interested in it, but really don't know what direction to take. So, you know, that's one of the things that we discussed as well, is that's one of the most important parts of these organizations, and yet it's not mandated by the government to have them. So, you know, that's gonna be a difficulty, so if Bert runs into that, I think we're gonna, and you're going to, that's one of the challenges going forward, is how do we start to change that picture as well?
Okay, just in relation to this motion though, I would really like to keep the conversation very direct and simple when it comes to that. Essentially, all I'm after is find which organizations are on video, because they all won't be, I'm sure.
Right.
Then
There's-
focus on the ones that are most in line, that most successful ones that are most in line with us. So ideally rural municipalities to start, but then also maybe doing, you know, one of the bigger towns or something like that. But based on this, if you were able to watch one, that gives us, say, 10 to 12 reports per year, where it doesn't have to become part of this package and a huge discussion. Literally, if it's a one-page report, you know, watch this meeting, these are the items that they covered, please, you know, contact me if there's any further items that we want to discuss for ours. Then it's something quick and concise that we can review, and it will give us some ideas of what other successful areas are doing.
I think you're gonna find there won't be very many that are videoed, because
That could be the very well case.
most of it don't even record their council meetings.
Yeah.
Never mind board meetings. So it might not be very many.
Right. And if that's the case, that's cool. So, you know, but we could take with what we know.
But
I think the idea is
I'm
great.
gonna call the question.
I was just going to say, you're 100% correct. There aren't many that televise, but there are some that send out quarterly or monthly newsletters or summaries. And so if I could make a friendly amendment, I won't make the amendment, but a friendly suggestion to make an amendment, instead of to say watch another televised meeting, if we say televised meeting or meeting summary.
Absolutely.
And then that way, that would kind of give us that opportunity. But it's a great example of benchmarking, and I think it would be pretty easy to do in the way that it's being brought forward.
Do we need somebody from the board to make that amendment?
Yeah, I would encourage you to make the amendment that we include the summaries of those meetings that aren't televised.
Okay, I accept that amendment.
You accept that?
Absolutely.
Okay. And I'll call the question. All in favor?
Okay. Then I do have a few more comments on this.
Yeah, let's just finish that one, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're approved, on that motion, so now you go ahead.
Perfect, sorry about that. Procedure is pretty rusty on me too. So 41D, and let me just pick this one up. Okay, need different glasses, sorry. 41D, build relationships with local First Nations and explore potential to collaborate on business opportunities. Currently, this is listed on here as the responsibility of the CAO. That is something that I think is missing the mark, and I think that the EDO should at least be included on the responsibility for that task.
Okay, go ahead, Bert.
So CAO is listed. We actually just had this discussion at a staff meeting a little bit earlier this week. So where it says CAO, that means that it's the CAO's responsibility to either do it himself or to assign and pull from the rest of administration. So when you see that, think of that as a blanket title of saying all of administration. So it's the CAO's responsibility, but he certainly will pull from other resources. And I'm actually really excited to let the committee know that, so we did have, as one of our blue sky items in the June meeting, it was the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous Persons. We had tabled it from this meeting with the suggestion to bring it to a council meeting. So we did bring it to a council meeting. Council then sent it to Governance and Priorities, where they had a further discussion, and from Governance and Priorities, it went back to council. And so council now actually has a plan to reach out and to do some engagement. And so it aligns fully with this 4.1D. And it's something that, we had started to talk about here based on conversations we had at business meetings and with some different folks. And we went through the process of bringing it from committee to council to GMP back to council, and away we go. So we're continuing down that path of reconciliation and inclusion and all of that. And council has some ideas in regards to, well, we also had at the same meeting, they adopted a new flag policy. So we'll see some changes with the types and number of flags that are going to be flown at municipal facilities in the near future. And it was kind of nice to see this moving forward a little bit. And of course, because it is one of those ongoing items, it's listed as December 25th or December of 2025. But that doesn't mean that that's the completion date. That just means that between now and then, it will have continuous action on that item.
Go ahead.
Just a question, and I've wondered this for a bit in regards to their First Nations and treaties, et cetera, as to perhaps with that, is to include that we are the counties in Treaty 6 and 8, and have a declaration stated maybe on our agenda and stated prior to us commencing a meeting. So even with that, if someone is viewing the meeting or a council meeting, and council I know is a whole nother bag, that they see that there's an acknowledgement towards the treaty and our Indigenous partners and friends in this area. Just, because that is, if you're flying a flag, I would suggest an acknowledgement. I don't know where that falls in procedures but that'd be maybe a suggestion or something
Go
to
ahead, Bert.
kind of tuck in there.
Great comment, and our communications team has been working on getting that to make sure that they get it right. So we do have, there is now a municipal guide that's available on how to sort of properly do the recognition. And you're 100% right. We are on Treaty 6 and Treaty 8. There may be a Métis Nation acknowledgement and that kind of thing with it as well. But they're in the final stages of getting that approved, and that's actually part of what Council had talked about as part of the dialogue. Before we start using it, what we want to do is we want to check with the groups to make sure that we've got it right, and then they will begin using it.
Yeah, no, I've wondered that for some time, so that's perfect.
Well, I think one of the things that we're learning in this process is that we really have to ask what that acknowledgement is, not dictate what it is. And this is a fundamental problem with this whole process, and that's why it's such a sensitive thing. Is we haven't really asked because we really don't understand. So we need to understand in order to acknowledge. And I think that's the part that we are working through with this whole, and that's why this discussion starting here and going through the council, there's been a lot of discussion on this since it started right here. And, one of the things that I find is lacking is as we discuss it, but we haven't really been able to sit down with our Indigenous partners and say, what is it that we need to do here in order to bring this forward for them as people. So, and this is going to be an ongoing thing, I think, so.
I think it would be fair that a lot of community groups have felt that frustration and continue to feel it. And there's a real willingness to reach out, but we're still building a lot of those channels
Yep.
to pursue.
Well, like what we talked about at our P&G meeting was, we could put this stuff in, but does it mean anything to our Indigenous friends? So by having communication with them, we want to do something that means something to them. Not just words on a page saying something.
Just adding in that part of this discussion, that was one of the questions that I had as well, is from an ECDEV perspective and building these relationships. I know last year I was incredibly disappointed with the lack of involvement that the county had in the National Truth and Reconciliation day activities in Whitecourt. And even as a committee, I would encourage everybody that can go and participate in any of those celebrations to please do.
And I think, you know, you hit the nail on the head, is that if you're not really understanding what it is and how we should participate, you're not going to have that participation. And this is a fundamental flaw with the Truth and Reconciliation, is that we need to be the ones that understand first. And I think that's what we're struggling with, because we haven't had that dialogue. We haven't really got into that visceral stuff to really understand how we're going to communicate that to the people that don't sit around these discussion tables. You know, that's the learning part, because we have a huge problem that we have to overcome. And, you know, I feel really good that it starts here. And I feel really compromised that I don't know how to make it work. So,
Just a second, Bert. Like, we could have all these, we could have a parade and events and everything, but it's good for us. But does it mean anything to the Aboriginal community?
Absolutely.
So that's what we gotta find, is what they need or want, so we can do it for them. But us just throwing a parade or something, what does it mean to them?
And I'm not talking about us throwing them a parade. I'm talking about if we want to get a seat at the table, we have to show up. You know, these are their events, you know, so if that's the case, if we're invited, then we need to show up. And I think we have to ask for the invitation, not sit back and wait to be invited. You know, so things like, exactly like I said, like that particular day, it's a national holiday, it's one day a year. And I think if we're have integrity about speaking about this topic, then we need to make a real effort to take part.
Go ahead, Bert.
So last year, we did supply county tents. And so we had 2 tents that were there last year as well. All of the firewood that was on site was all supplied from the county as well. So I know that was our involvement and support for it last year. I don't know this year if we've actually received any kind of a formal invitation. Chances are that possibly they have, but we will have the support of having 2 tents there again this year. That's the part of it that I'm aware of. I think it's maybe a great question for us to follow up on to see what other county involvement that there would be. But I know based on that discussion the council's having, the reaching out and having the dialogue and figuring out how to participate, how are we invited to participate is one of the things that's on the council radar.
Perfect.
Go ahead, Peter.
and I think that we need members at large from the Indigenous community sitting on these economic development forums, because what we may see as economic development may not be exactly the same as what they would see, but we could build something out of that.
Absolutely.
Okay, anything else?
I can move on to the next topic, okay? So the next one that I had, 42C, the booth at the trade fair. So with the trade fair, and of course with this one, the way it reads, they annually operate the booth at the Chamber Trade Fair to showcase the county, including its attractions and the Golden Triangle. And this is listed as the responsibility of the EDO. Again, I think that this is something that the booth at the trade fair on the EDO should also be on the shoulders of community engagement with the CAO and council. And that's something that when it's more than just economic development with having that booth there. And I also think that with having the booth there, I don't feel that it should be the responsibility of the EDO to carry the weight of that entire project. You know, that doesn't seem to be the case with other municipalities, and it doesn't seem congruent with what other municipalities are doing. So,
Peter?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think that that's something that has to be shared amongst all of the folks that are in our admin because I know last year that was all on your shoulders. And I could see that there was a very small group of people carrying the weight of a big organization, so I 100% agree with that. Now, how do we do it?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So, yes, the lion's share of the planning and the organizing did fall on my shoulders this year for sure. It was an interesting year this year because, of course, really our restrictions and that sort of thing didn't start to lift until the beginning of April, middle of April. So, where most years we would have several months to many months of advance lead time. This year, because of the pandemic and the way that everything sort of it was coming along, it was a bit of a shorter timeline. And so in past years, what we've done is we've actually had a wide number of municipal staff and that sort of thing that have attended and that have been able to be there to assist with the booth and all of that. This year, thankfully, we had our Economic Development Committee step up, and we had some of our fire members that were there as well. Our REIB was there, and I think we had, 4 counselors for sure that were through the booth through the course of a couple of days, which was fantastic. So we will hopefully be working with a longer timeline, or a more of an advanced timeline next year, and be able to kind of do a bit more of a holistic approach as we've done in the long term over the last few years. This year, I thought we had a really good entry with the flowers that we had, courtesy of Twin Acres Greenhouse and the other door prizes. I think we had better traffic flow into our booth than what a lot of the others did. So that was pretty good. So I think we're at a pretty good level of things. Also, the photo contest entry book was kind of a major selling point. We had a lot of people kind of flipping through that and all of that, and it was great to have Cindy in the Golden Triangle there too. So we'll build off of this year's success to try and do it a little bit more holistically and get more folks involved. Undoubtedly, it's on the tactical plan that I would be the one in charge, but we'll try to make it as inclusive as we can for getting staff and everybody to it, and try to give a little bit more than 2 to 3 weeks notice, which I think was kind of what we were working with this year.
Yeah, I did a couple hours stint there with you too, Bert, and a lot of the residents, county residents, were stopping by the booth. I mean, for councilors, members of council, and staff, it is a great way to get a barometer reading on what's going on in the county. There, we discussed everything from taxes to photos to tourism to economic development and everything. So, would it be appropriate to recommend to council to add to this the CAO and the economic development officer together in this document? Because I could certainly see where the broader discussion, both with the staff and with council, would then be facilitated by the two of them working together on this. Or do we just leave it to the EDO and count on that communication happening?
I believe the CEO is Bert's boss. So what he does, he has to talk to the CEO anyways. So I'm good with the way the document reads right now.
Yeah, no, that was just a question, like, I'm just trying to understand how, if this is falling on to Bert, then he's using his regular communication channels and there's no need to change this document.
Yep.
It's understood that he's gonna be partnering and looking for that support across the.
Actually, Bert.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So just a suggestion, Art. Yes, hard to change the duties within the document, but maybe a recommendation that we have as big a presence, as inclusive a presence, as large a presence from the county, as involved a presence, however you would like to word it. That might be a good motion for us to put towards our presence for next year.
Yeah, I don't think I need to express it as a motion. I learned a lot about the county from its residents by doing a stint there, and I really enjoyed it. And I was still having conversations 2 hours after I was done my 2 hours at the booth. So it was still really good. So I don't see any need to change it. Just let's just call it discussion on the point.
Patricia.
Awesome. And I just want to clarify on that. In no way did I mean that as a slight against last year's, because I think with what everything actually did go really well. And also the time I spent in the booth, I really enjoyed. But if Bert had to come down with COVID on Thursday, we would have been in a whole different scenario. So the more the merrier.
Well, and I think the other part of it was really interesting. What I learned from Bert is that you have to have that linebacker approach where you block traffic so it comes into the booth in such a positive way, because it was amazing how many people he'd jump out there and just say, hey, here we are, and they'd come over, so you learn a lot from that experience. Like, I learned a lot from that experience just watching what he was doing, and like you said, it was so enjoyable because there was folks that were talking about everything. So
Just
Oh, sorry.
one comment before Bert. It's not just this event that we should be talking about. It's every event that we do.
Yeah,
We should have people from the board there, like our Blue Ridge Recreation Day. The amount of people that come there and the conversations that we have with our residents is unbelievable. Like, there's an old fellow in Blue Ridge, born and raised in Blue Ridge, and he sat and talked to Jeremy and I for half an hour about everything that's gone through the community. So the more involvement we can have from our board at these things, and I believe that's why we have a board, it's not just to sit here and discuss things, it's to get involved in the community.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Are we ready for the next point? Okay. Sorry.
So to that, so thank you everyone for those comments. No criticism or anything taken. There's always room for improvement, and this is why I so appreciate the board that we have. And Peter, to your comment, it does work to pull people into the booth, but much as it was back in the day when I worked for a sunroom sunroom sales company, I didn't sell any sunrooms at this trade show either. So, thank you.
Just one more comment on that. At those trade shows, I find standing outside your booth, because there's so many people that will walk by and they won't come into your booth to talk to you. But if you're out in the hall, they will stop and talk to you.
And being beside a popular food vendor.
Yes.
yeah,
The sausage dog is a great place to be.
That was very helpful, and that was a wonderful happenstance. It's also one of the few places where you can just give candy out freely and nobody questions it, so.
Exactly. So the next point I had 4.2D about the Fort Bicentennial event on and again, this one being listed as the EDO. Now, so with this one, I see it should also be shouldered by other departments as community engagements, and I feel that it may be putting too much pressure on the EDO's time that could be spent on long-term economic development activities. So I see it as an important event, but it is something that I'd like to see spread across more than one department.
yeah. I'm involved with that right now, and I see, I don't know, quite a few of the staff come to the organizational meetings. I think it's building. So the concern is, again, this is a huge event. But I think that what the focus is right now is that there's a lot of groups that are wanting to have a piece of that celebration. And because we're just in the process of putting that together, I think we've had, 4 or 5 staff members or county staff actually already involved
Yes.
in that process.
This is again one of those things where I think that proper direction from council really makes it easy and empowering to do, because it gives you a solid foundation to stand on everything that you're doing. So what's significant about this is, okay, yep, I'm kind of the point of contact, but council has also at a previous meeting this summer they appointed the Friends of the Museum Society from Fort Assiniboine as being the lead agency. So all grants applications and everything will come through that group. Dale Klein, former counselor and resident from Fort Assiniboine area, Dale's been asked to kind of chair that committee by the Friends of the Museum group. So I'm working closely with Dale. The last meeting that we had a couple weeks ago, we had 14 different groups, including the Pembina School Division that were represented, that were around the table. And so we've laid out the prospective dates. We're looking at the dates as being July 6th to 10th of 2023, with Saturday, July 9th being sort of the main day. But there is an opportunity to kind of do a banner of events throughout the entire year. And there are some significant events that will be happening at the museum with the schools this year, because Fort Assiniboine is now mentioned in the new school curriculum. So that was something that we found out about based on the principal of the school there that's part of the Pembina Hills School Division. And so I'm the kind of the main point of contact and coordinator, but the work will fall to the committee. So that's sort of the way the council has laid the workflow out. Right now, and I'm happy to say, because yesterday I had a couple of conversations, we found two other, so the CIP grant is going to be kind of the main grant funding that's available for the project. That's a provincial grant, but there is also a historical marker that we can apply for, and we started that conversation yesterday. And there is also another smaller grant for up to 15,000 that can be used for major events at the provincial level. And I'm just working on the process of uncovering the contacts we need for the federal level. So my role at this point is to kind of uncover all that, pass it over to that group, and then let the group and everybody kind of run with it. But that's sort of the way that my coordinator role works on this part of it. Is I won't be doing the actual applications. They actually, we had a couple of the volunteers that really put their nose to the grindstone, because we had a September 15th deadline to get a really bare bones grant application in, and they can add more to it in the ensuing weeks. But it's about a 5 to 6 month process for that grant to get approved. And the next window doesn't open until January 15th, which would mean they wouldn't get money until probably June of next year if we hadn't have made that window on the 15th. So that's sort of the mechanics as to how that's kind of wheeled itself out. So I'm very happy and excited to be in the role that I'm in there. But as Peter mentioned, we do have a couple of staff that attend. That we've got many of our Woodland staff that are volunteers and part of that committee group.
Just before you move, just because it says EDO on the paper doesn't mean he's doing all the work. We need a point of contact.
100%.
So if you're reading that Bert's doing all the work, it's not the case.
And no, and that's why this alleviates the concern that I had about resources. But that's why I wanted clarity around these items, is to ensure what resources exactly is he gonna be responsible for when it comes to that. Okay, cool.
Well, and that's the comment I was gonna make as well, is that I'm not sure if it's happened yet, but I know Ron Orr is the Minister of Culture. And I think Bert can elaborate on this, but I think what's happening is that he's gonna have a direct line to the minister's office, because they're not sure if he's gonna be there after this shuffle that's going on. So I don't know where that's at, Bert, but I know that was a concern. And he is part of the Canadian Voyageur Brigade, who was absolutely not aware that the province had no intention of being involved, but they have an intention now. So that's opened some doors.
Nice.
3 incoming calls from the minister's office in the last week. That was where we were able to uncover and do all of that. So thank you very much to Quinton and the brigade group for working that personal connection. And yep, we've got the channels of communication and operation open.
Okay, the next one I had is 4.3, and just a comment in regard to the high-speed internet. With this, in just wondering if that's something that's eventually gonna transfer to an infrastructure management portfolio. Essentially meaning, chasing infrastructure for internet, I don't see necessarily as an ECDev responsibility, sharing the outcome of that, I see as economic development going forward and sharing that with businesses and potential projects. But the actual building of it should fall under infrastructure.
Do you want
Yeah, and that was one of the things that leapt off the page for me as well, as I don't know if the high-speed internet really does fit well with this section. I see it mostly as an infrastructure issue. I can see the successes of building of an infrastructure being shared through economic development, making that awareness to business and industry and our partners. But I do very much see this as an infrastructure issue. And we did go around this topic already once with a previous study. And I believe the consensus here was we threw our hands up in the air that there was very little that we could actually do on this particular item. So I can see through the strategic plan and now the priority of it being, it needed a place. I just wasn't sure this was the place for it. And if I was a resident, this was one of the issues that did come out of our conversation with residents was, when are we going to get some improvement on this? To put this in this location seems like it was just like dropped in there because we had no other place for it. But I just don't know how we as a committee or even our EDO can actually address this issue as part of our portfolio. Now, this document belongs to council, so I'm sure it's something that council is going to continue to have a lot of discussion on. I just don't see, and maybe I can ask Bert for your insight on this, is what do you feel we could really do with this in this part of the strategic plan?
I was hoping somebody would ask this question.
I just want to make a comment before you start, Rick. Our infrastructure department looks after county-owned infrastructure. The internet is not going to be owned by the county. They have nothing to do with it. So by saying they should be looking after it, it's not their wheelhouse. We just need somebody to be point on it. Any information coming in, and that's where we thought Bert would be a good contact for that. Go ahead.
Well, and this is really complex because council is even involved with through John being on the RMA, pushing that whole internet agenda on a provincial level. And you're right. It's in here, but all of us, the whole of the council is involved in trying to figure this thing out. And it's got to the point now where it's the Rural Municipalities Association that's dealing with it. So you have 69 municipalities in the province of Alberta that's pushing this agenda. So it is here, but really, you're right. It's not something that we directly have pushed. It's an indirect push.
Go ahead, Bert.
So a little bit of background and then a couple comments on paths forward. In the time that I worked for the county, internet and internet access has always been sort of part of the economic development portfolio. It's also been something that, because of the importance, we've addressed it in the past around the read a table and that kind of thing as well. Where we're limited in what we can do, especially under 4.3A, we can coordinate with players to make sure that they're aware of the federal and the provincial grant money that's there. We can work with them to make sure that they've got applications in, that we're providing support letters. We've done all of those roles. We continue to do those kinds of roles. Really what it comes down to, though, is that if the county wants to expedite, especially for tower-based Wi-Fi and all of that, there really needs to be a county component of some kind of a cash or a land injection in order to make that happen. And under the current budget that we have and under the economic recovery plan, that isn't really the easiest path forward for the county. So being able to support those companies that have identified the opportunities here and that are willing to put in the hard infrastructure, that seems to be kind of the main part there under A. Under B, what's interesting is we have that provincial plan for connectivity, and we also have the mandate from the feds of the 50 and 10. And so the province, for the first time ever, when they put their plan out in, I can't remember when it came out, earlier this year anyways, but they have low Earth satellite as being part of the solution. And so if there is a path forward where the county can look at helping, it would be for us to be able to facilitate how our residents can better access Starlink and the other programs that are available, possibly look at some kind of a subsidy or a connection program or something like that for residents that may not have the ability or that kind of thing. Maybe it's a grant-based program, whatever council would like to do. But in my mind anyways, if I had to say what's the immediate path forward for us, under A, we continue to support the bigger companies and the folks that want to put in towers and bigger infrastructure and all of that, and that we listen to any of them that want to come and to present to us and talk about how their systems would work. And under B, it would be how do we get residents to better embrace low Earth satellites. We know it's not the best solution, but it's the right now solution. And how do we help residents find a better path to be able to implement that?
Just to kind of wrap up what I had on this portion, the last part of it was basically, I see this and I see the framework, and I wasn't here, kind of 4 years ago, like been new to the committee. So in looking at this document, this is the first one that I've really got to sink my teeth into and see as a direction and a path forward for the EDC and the EDO. And in looking at it, I see like the structure and so on as feeling really good. But truthfully, when I went through it, I had some real disappointments in that I really feel that it lacks some meat around business development. And that was my concern with it. And looking at it, for example, what I see over and over and over is tourism, 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 tourism. And tourism is very important. I'm not taking away from that. But looking at the percentage of work versus return, what kind of return are we getting on our investment of time and resources and what kind of type of job creation and business with this are we focusing on? So for example, especially right now, we're coming into a time where we have high inflation, we're gonna have less tourism dollars, less people spending money on tourism, presumption is in the next little while. And we're also having massive changes in the energy industry and new types of energy being developed and new businesses coming out. And in this entire document, I don't see any focus on the energy industry whatsoever. And I think that that's incredibly missed the mark in that sector. And I would really like to see this go back to council for that part of it, to include energy as a pillar and as a huge focus for not only this committee, but for everything dealing with woodlands going forward from a business perspective, is we need the world to know we're open for business. And we need to make sure that we're not missing some of these opportunities on new types of energy development and what could potentially be out there. So as a resident and as a member of this committee, I'm looking at this and I'm really disappointed to not see a focus on energy development.
I very much appreciate your comments. I'm going to go back to my earlier statement, which is when you look at that 4.1, the collaboration, while there may not be a specific point in there on the energy transition, it is a significant part of 4.1. And we are doing a lot of work, probably more work now, more closely with our industry contacts, certainly than in the 4 years that I've been with the county. And coming off of the SiteLink meeting, we realized that we have more work to do around site development and site identification and site marketing working with industry partners and as well as within our county assets. So this is where I 100% agree with you. It isn't 100% visually there to say, yes, this point number 4.1E, but we're working on the premise that, yes, we know that working with site selectors, working on energy transition, working with especially our heavy industrial partners, that's where the solution is for the county to build its tax base in a meaningful way so that we don't have to go through a economic recovery in the way that we've been going through the last 4 years again.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on that point because I don't think that energy needs to be picked out of the full breadth of industry that is available within the county. 4.1, I think, really identify and pursue new economic opportunities in industry, business, and tourism, and that covers it all. You could argue that energy has taken a back seat to forestry over the last 3 years, and in this county, we should be spending more time on forestry. But I think there is a way to address your issue, and it's the other thing that leapt off the page in this document for me, and that is we have an economic development strategic plan of which 85% of the plan has no supporting policies currently in place, no supporting documents in place. And this is where I think the challenge to us as a committee is to go back into this document and actually ask ourselves, what would a supporting policy look like for each of these points? And the document and how it's come forward and how it's been organized and thought of both as a working document for council, but a document that falls in line with other municipalities and how they're doing their documents, we are spot on. But the one thing that comes off the page here is 85% of the work that this committee does has no supporting policies. Now, this is where a supporting policy, I think, and I always find out what our supporting policy is when I listen to what Bert has to say about each point. And if I could just summarize what Bert says, in a policy, in a half-page, 4-point policy, you could fill in the blank on this, and that's where you would identify the energy industry and new energy forms of energy would be in the supporting policy. The structure, the layout, the plan as it exists for the county, and then the strategic plan and its tactical components flow nicely enough. But somebody on the outside looking in at this would go, so you have an economic development committee and you have a structure and everything in place for it, but it has no supporting policy to guide it or to provide someone looking from, as a resident looking in, saying, so what does this committee actually do? And to me, if we picked, 2 points for each meeting for the next year, we could actually have a supporting policy for that, and then that could be forwarded to council to clarify some of those points, to add in forestry, energy, and any other new partners that may be coming into it. And I think it also closes the next, what you would expect to be done in the next round of development of this document for this committee.
Excellent.
Well, I agree 100%, but as you know, those policies are things that we're forming as we build this. This is the foundational piece which was put together, and then the policies will build on that. And what's really interesting for me is that SiteLink conference really reinforced how little we know about the strengths and the assets of our regional partners who will play into this. And that's why we have to be careful with policy that we don't exclude those partners who we have absolutely no knowledge of what their assets are and what they would be able to contribute to the regional development. And so it's an interesting dilemma we're in. But the foundational document is there for us to do exactly like Art says. How are we now going to develop that?
Just a comment before Patricia.
Yeah.
This is new.
Yeah.
Our previous council members, there were some of them didn't want a ec dev department. And they didn't put much into the strat plan. So we have a council now that is 100% behind this. So we're starting basically new. So I agree with what you're saying, but you gotta give it time to work itself through. We just can't snap our finger and say, we're gonna have all these policies. To build policies takes time. And like Art said, we do a meeting, discussion, we'll probably have to go back, revise it. So it's just going to take time to get this done. So I appreciate what your ideas and everything, but we just have to work at it.
Absolutely. And in that way, I didn't mean it also as a criticism or personal in that way. The way that I'm looking at this, like I said, the structure I think is great. I think that we need to build on comments like these and to go from that area. But one thing, I'd like to correct something that I said when I said energy, I actually should have said everything but tourism, because that is what it was meaning when I said that, so I apologize actually and want to clarify that. And in saying that, I recognize the importance of tourism, but I don't think we should be spending more than maximum 20% of our time at this table discussing tourism.
Well, and it's very interesting that you should say that, because that's one of the things that has come out in both the SiteLink and the consultants we're working with right now, is they're telling us that even though tourism is the one that seems to be getting the window, it's the what do they call that? The low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And so it's the one that's the most volatile as well, just as you mentioned. So, but the problem with it was before here in this municipality, it didn't have a space, and we finally got it one, and so now it's dominating some of the. So, yeah, so it's interesting.
Whatever.
I love these meetings. So, a couple of comments. So yes, you're exactly correct. It is incredibly exciting to have tourism have a place within the strategic plan, and to have it as the flip side of the coin with economic development. That makes sense, and that aligns us with a lot of other municipalities. The general rule, you're not going to invest in a place that you don't know. And 90% of the time, the first time you come to a place, you're there as a tourist. So it's kind of your lost leader. It's your way that people start to understand and learn about you, and then you flip and go from there. But that being said, it is also incredibly volatile, and we know that things are changing. We're working with the RITA for establishing the DMO, and the intent from the 4 points that are there under tourism is, we don't currently have a Parks and Recreation department for the county. We know that we have a plethora of county attractions, and we know that we are blessed with all of the natural surroundings and everything that we have, and we'll talk about that a bit more as we get into the photo contest. But the reality is that right now, to be able to market our existing county facilities and be able to allow people to use them safely, it doesn't even make sense for us to be doing that on a really large scale. Right now, our county attractions are basically for county and local residents, right? And when we go beyond what our capacity is, that's where we run into issues with quality and safety and all of those kinds of things. So I agree with you 100%. The reality is most of our tourism We do have the tourism marketing, and I apologize because I do have the Rita Tourism Guide. I was gonna make it available for everybody, but I forgot to bring them down, so if anyone wants one before you go, I do have them. But we have our ad that we had placed within the tourism guide. That's really the big extent of the tourism advertising. Most of what we're doing now at this point is the destination marketing part of it, and trying to help any of our local businesses that may want to evolve or that may want to have a tourism focus, to have them understand how they can build a business case, what are the resources we can pair them with, how can they market their business. We want to help them do all of those things. So it really is more of a focus on the business development aspect of tourism for us at this point. So it does align a little bit more with some of the rest. Now to the second point in regards to industry, and a suggestion for the committee would be, you're right, it does take time to develop policy. We want to make sure that we get it right. And when it comes to engaging and talking about new opportunities in industry, business, and tourism, maybe setting a policy in place at this point in time isn't quite the right thing to do. But something we could do is to put together sort of a summary of, hey, here's the key points we want to highlight, or here's the just exactly that message. Woodlands County is open for investment, right? Maybe it's a consistency of message or something like that we want to promote. So while it might not be a full-blown policy, maybe there is a motion or a potential for a motion in there to say you want the EDO to bring back, this is the standard format in which we talk to potential investors, or something like that. Maybe there's some guidelines on how we communicate or something like that the committee might want to put forward.
Just quickly to add to what you said, Bert, I think that's great, and I think that where it will really shine is if you have the ability to view these other AcDev committees, that I think that's really going to help us get that information to see how they're approaching the business development for those type of industries as well. So.
Okay, Bert?
Yeah, so just to follow up on that in 11 of the 13 points that are in strategic priority 4 have no supporting policies currently in place. And a supporting policy can be generic enough to address each one of those points and provide some clarity to a resident or a new member of council or a new member to a committee about what each of those strategic priorities mean and how we are working with them. So that for me was the one challenge that comes from this document to us as a committee, which would be to develop a supporting policy for each one of those points. So I would like to make a motion that be a priority for us, and that we work with our EDO to address one or two of these policy points at each meeting for the next year if necessary. And I think that also engages us in a discussion about the value of each of these points in the tactical plan, and then how we can best develop a policy or support that point as a responsible committee reporting to council.
Okay.
So the motion would be to address a policy development for one or 2 points of the strategic plan at subsequent meetings until we have a policy for all of them.
Okay, so accept your motion. Any questions on the motion? Go ahead.
I would just like to actually make a friendly amendment to add that those items be chosen the meeting prior, so that it gives anybody who wants to look into it the month before the next meeting. So it's not a Friday thing that we find out which ones we're gonna review.
Yeah, I can, very friendly amendment. I would have left that up to the discretion and the communication of the EDO to the committee. I think Bert can more than adequately handle that.
Okay, perfect.
Go ahead, Bert.
So a question, Art, thank you, and I understand exactly where you're going with this. We want to make sure that we have a policy that is a document we can rely on, that supports our actions under each point. Would you be amenable if we had an overall ECDEV policy that might apply to more than one point? Or do you feel that it would have to be an individual policy under each point, which we can certainly do that, but that means that, you know, if we do an overall kind of ECDEV operational policy, that might address more of them at one time, and then we can maybe address some specifics.
Well, I mean, we have 4 major parts. It could just be 4 policy documents. That's that, and we don't have to have the individual policies for each point. I think we could have a policy for 4.1 and a policy for 4.2, right? So, sorry about that.
Okay, one thing I don't wanna see on this board is, I sit on another board. Every time we get a new board member, they wanna revise the policies. 3/4 of our meeting is revising policies because somebody's got a different idea. And it's something that, to me, doesn't need to be done. You come up with a policy and you stick to it. And once a year, you can go through and revise your policies. But this constant, every meeting, revising policy after policy, to me, is a waste of time.
100%.
So I'd like to make it very clear that once we get a policy, we leave it there for a year. And then we can revise it or change it. Go ahead.
I would just like to add to that for any, have the policy, like you said, once a year that it's revised, but that the chair would have the discretion to make an immediate amendment or something like that.
Yeah.
Just so that if we end up having some glaring deficiency in a policy down the road, that the procedure is in place for the chair to make that decision.
Sure.
Can I just ask for clarification? The idea of the policy is so that whomever reads this has guidelines to work within the strategic plan. That's what it is?
Yes.
So I think a general one that's applicable, that doesn't have to be revised, is more even sustainable. Like I'm trying to figure out what this will look like at a meeting. Is this under new business every time, like,
And this is the education part kicking in on this point.
yeah, like I'm going
All right.
like, okay.
So,
I'm going like,
first of all,
good crikey.
that you're absolutely correct, Bert, that a policy could cover multiple points, and the policy should be transparent enough for people to see the work that we're doing, and flexible enough to accommodate a changing economic situation. Okay, so you're right. You don't want to go into a cycle of policy renewal every time we have a meeting. But the other thing that I want to say to your point, though, is that the chair does not intervene on a change in policy. The chair is a neutral position and brings it to the committee for when there is a change. So your request is not appropriate.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
to be fair to that, I'm not looking for like a point by point, like 50 points on every one of these things. I'd just like to see this part of what's a new evolving document has come to us as a committee. And honestly, as a resident, when I look at it and I say, well, this committee, 85% of what this committee does has absolutely no set policy. So let's develop one that fits with each of the 4 points that we have. I think that's the challenge to us through council to now look at the next developments of the strategic plan and address that. I think that with the language and discussion that we've had as a committee for the last number of years, that is well within our ability to set a little bit of policy guidelines and have it flexible enough to accommodate the work of the EDO and the work of the committee within the structure of council. So I know what it's like. I did 12 years of policy in education, and it was a continual frustration, but necessity. And now I think what we're looking for is a nice middle of the road that kind of clarifies this. And it's also some of the work that we can do as a committee to help future committees and future councils. That's the spirit.
So a suggestion for a friendly amendment may be policy development, so going back to the motion, to have a policy developed for 1 or 2 points of the strategic plan until all are covered. And I would say starting with 4.1, and I would be willing to try to bring a draft of something back to you in October for that October 25th meeting, if everybody would be amenable to that.
And Lynn,
Perfect.
so moved.
Okay, so that's the motion that Bert just said you wanna go with? Do you wanna repeat that motion, Bert?
Sure, as soon as I finish writing it down.
Just so we have it correct.
I am going to
Okay,
do my
just
best.
want to get, so this is for discussion of these points, because I see this as a job description also for our EDO, correct? Okay.
Okay, Bert.
So there is a separate job description for the ECDEV position, and there is also the EDA Code of Ethics. And actually, that was one of the things, I think you guys have seen the EDO job description at past meetings.
The 10.
But the EDA Code of Ethics, I think, is something that would be part of this policy document.
Okay.
Yeah, so that, then there's a general understanding of, you know, what the code of ethics is that we are following, and what it does is it clearly lays out that expectation of privacy and confidentiality and not doing any harm and competing fairly and doing all of those things. So I think that, you know, it's been an interesting revelation to me today to see the gap on how the public sees this. And again, it's just because I work in the industry, I see the industry, I'm this close to it, so I see it every day, right? But this is where I appreciate the perspective of saying, well, okay, from a resident perspective, I'm not seeing this, how can you show me that? The answer is pretty easily, and that's why I like this motion.
Okay, did you wanna repeat that motion?
Yes, I'm sorry. So a policy will be developed for 1 or 2 points of the strategic plan at each meeting until all are covered, starting with a point for our policy for 4.1 to be brought back to the October meeting.
Okay. You good with that?
Yep, that's my
Okay.
motion.
I'll call the question. All in favor? So passed.
All right.
Okay, is there anything more on strat plan?
I think that was the bulk that I had, and thank you everyone for that focus on that section 4. There are a lot of really other good bits that are in there in the other sections as well, and the strategic plan and the tactical plan are available on the website as well. But I think that you know, it is a great definition of the workload overall for the county. There is the Gantt chart that is involved with things as well, and so just to quickly kind of look at that, I think our next item to look at in October of '23 was to research and look at some different economic development strategies, and so I think that policy motion that was just passed, that covers, I think, in part some of that. And there's probably some updates and that sort of thing from SiteLink and some other things that we can work to deliver on that part of it. But given that that's sort of the next thing that I see that would be coming due on the strategic plan. Oh, I guess 23, that's next year, never mind. So we got a whole year to work that through. So November of 22, that's the other one I'm looking at. So 4.4C, leveraging Travel Alberta and other resources to develop tourism opportunities. We can do a full report on that sort of around that November meeting. But is there any questions on that or anything for November that you would like me to prepare and bring forward that would be specific? We'll see if we can maybe get our Travel Alberta rep here maybe for that meeting. Okay, then I think that that's all that I had under that section. Yeah, thank
Okay,
you.
next is 6.1, Economic Developers of Alberta.
Okay, so as we move on to that,
Should we have a motion to accept
Oh.
strategic thinking as information?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
thank you.
All in favor? So passed. Next is 6.1.
Okay, sorry, making sure I've got everything there. Okay, so on to 6.1, what we have is one of the annual events that Economic Developers of Alberta does is the Ministry Dinner. I think this would be the 5th or 6th year for the Ministry Dinner. During COVID, it went to a bit of a different format, but it is a very interesting event because you have sometimes ministers, usually deputy ministers and directors from both federal and provincial ministries that are all in attendance. There's about 130, 140 people in the room, and the format is a unique one. They do reverse speed dating. So you are assigned a seat, you sit down at your table, and as each course goes by, the dignitaries in the room move from one table to the next. So by the time you go through all of your courses, from your aperitif to your dessert, everyone that are the dignitaries in the room have had a chance to come and sit with each table for at least 15 to 20 minutes. So it's a really great way to rub elbows and shake hands and get to know some different ministry reps and find out, what's current with different programs and all of that. We have a scheduling conflict with this event this year. The Whitecourt District Chamber has planned their Economic Forum event also for the evening of October 19th. And at our council meeting last week, what council has decided to do, I guess we'll finalize it at the next council meeting. But we went from the council meeting to the GNP, and at GNP, council has found an additional $6,000 to put into two new chamber events, or two chamber events that we didn't have in our budget. So one is the Economic Forum, so they're going to be buying a table for $5,000 is what council has recommended to go back to the next council meeting for approval. It isn't approved yet. And then to participate in the Trunk or Treat event, which is also in October, but they've put about $1,500 towards that event for being able to have a presence and give out candy and that sort of thing for that. So based on that, we know that the majority of council and likely the EDO will be at the Economic Forum, which will be here in Whitecourt. So as a result, we don't have someone to attend on behalf of the municipality unless we have one of our members at large attend. And that's really what the RFD is all about.
Just gonna check my calendar. So-
So just maybe Bert, explain a little better. So basically you go in the night before.
No, I would recommend go in day of, but
Okay.
because the event doesn't finish until about 10:30, 11 o'clock in the evening, and there's often socializing afterwards, shall we say. I would recommend that you would stay over the night of the event and then probably come back the next day.
I would be able to attend if that's amenable, or if, and is it for one person or more than one person?
At this point, I just have the one ticket that we've sort of reserved. It is quite a unique experience, and it is a very, it's a smaller group, right? Like often when you go to some of these big ECDEV events, you'll have, 500 people that are there. This isn't that. They try to keep it to that, like, I think it's 120 or 140 max. And so, yeah, just being able to go and have a seat and sit and have some fun is wonderful, and we can certainly supply whoever is going to go with a big stack of business cards and all that good stuff, so.
Go ahead.
Well, and like the Rita was invited as well, and I think there was one ticket, and we chose to decline because we really don't have, we really don't know who we are yet, so we didn't think so. If, I would be prepared to make the motion that if you're able to go, Patricia, that you go, and that you bring back some information that I can also take back to
Fair enough.
the Rita.
Absolutely.
So I'll make that motion.
Okay, perfect.
Any questions on the motion? I'll call the question. All in favor? So passed.
Thanks, Patricia.
Yeah, thanks for doing that.
Yeah, I think it's.
Sounds like it'd be interesting.
Yeah.
I
I
can-
normally go to the, chamber meeting, so I'll be looking for feedback from you guys on how that was.
Awesome. Well, so I can give you feedback from the chamber meeting because I was able to attend that. Council was having their own meeting at the same time, but I can give you that, and then I'll get you prepared and ready for this one too. It really is a lot of fun, and you never know exactly who you're gonna meet, and there's been known to be poetry and singing and all kinds of things at past events. So, not that you have to sing yourself. It's just there's just spontaneous song and poetry.
Wait, what
We
did I
didn't tell her what was
Very positive environment.
You're originally from Newfoundland, you can handle a
I
song.
was just saying that, take your spoons.
I have a published book of poetry, by the way.
Well, see, it really is a lot of fun.
Bert, do we need a motion to accept his information, or is just? a motion?
No, I think the motion for Patricia to attend and book a hotel, I think is probably all that we need, and I've got that coming from Peter. I think that should do it.
Okay, so 6.2 is next, Prairie Can Youth Program.
Okay, so I had alluded to this a little bit earlier, but Prairie's Can is now fully staffed, and they're kind of finding their feet and their role and how they want to interact and how we can work on some things. And we have the benefit of working with Cami Curry, who Cami's previous role was with the province, so we've known her for a couple of years, and she's been really amenable and really wonderful to work with, and she's that way in her new role with Prairie's Can as well. And so there was an invitation that went out to us and a number of other municipalities to do, and I'm trying to remember if I actually had put the name on. So they call it their share meetings, so SHARE, and I can't remember for the life of me what the acronym was for. But it's basically a meeting that they are hoping to do about 2 to maybe 3 times a year, where they go through an overview of the department and all of the programs that they have that are new and that are existing and all of that. And so really what the slideshow presentation did, and you have a copy of the slide deck in the meeting package, is it gives some of the background on Prairie's Can. It talks about the mandate and the roles. It talks about some of the priorities and the priorities and the different resources that they have. And then it got into a little bit on some of the programs. And the Regional Innovation Ecosystems Program is an interesting one as well, and it's sort of based around cluster development and there might be sort of some future work and some things that we can do and that we can work on there. But the one that really kind of caught my attention and the one that they're working on, sort of currently developing, is this community economic development and diversification. And the only issue that we may have in participating with some of these is that these are generally matching programs or a third, and a third programs. And so somewhere, somehow, if we're going to implement, we either have to find a third party that has cash to contribute, or if it's something that we identify as a committee, we can certainly put forward to council and say, hey, we really think we need to invest in this or take a look at this. So the idea for today was just to present everyone with this information on the CEDD program. What I like is the idea of creating the community-based economic development strategy and then building into groups that we haven't sort of otherwise maybe worked with, and also that ability for it to respond to economic development opportunities. And so that's where, especially around the energy transition and some of the changes we're seeing in agriculture, there might be some good opportunities. It is kind of a one application sort of program though. So we certainly have it open to us as a path, but what we need to do is to come up with what is our best possible need and use, and how would we structure that. And Cami is certainly willing to work with us. I have had a secondary conversation with her after we had done the share meeting to go over some possible topics, and they're the ones that I've just kind of mentioned. But we need to have something that would be a very, very solid candidate that we would be willing to put forward, that we know had the solid financials behind it as well. So it's just to say there are some great opportunities that are there, but as we often find with government programs, there's certain strings and parameters and different things that we need to make sure that we fit into.
Just a question, Bert, and this is something that I couldn't find any information on, but I know, both Marvin and another person that worked on documentaries and stuff like that, that would be the vehicle that would, put some of that information into the public eye. Is there room for private contractors to get funding to forward innovation ecosystems and community economic development and diversification? And the reason I ask that question is because a lot of times there's so many things that are in alignment with what we do as economic development, but we don't have the partners or we don't see the people that are working on projects that would help us and would partner with us. And I don't know how that would work.
So I believe, yes, there is room for private partners. Like we could be the lead on the grant, but there is certainly room for partnering. I can go back and double check on that one specifically, but I generally with the federal applications I've seen, the more the merrier is the general guideline. So the more industry partners we would bring in, I think probably the stronger the application would likely be.
Okay, so the secondary question then would be, how would that play into the bigger picture? Would that mean that there's a direct monitoring of this, or would the private partners have to put a program into the
It would be basically everything rolled together into one grant application.
Okay.
So much like we had done with the TRF, where we
Yeah.
kind of got several municipalities working
Okay.
through growth on the one application, I think that would be the same thing, is you would have a lead on the application, and then the partners would all specify what they were putting in and what they were wanting to see from the outcomes.
Well, and the reason I ask this is because, we're constantly developing programs based on the grant rather than having something in place and then looking for a grant to apply to it, which is the way we should be doing it. So,
Well, and this is where in the conversation that I had with county about the CEDD was I said, hey, so agriculture and how we can expand it, looking at the value or at the energy transition part of it and what we can do there. those are two areas definitely where we would be, looking at parts of things. The other part of it is, is there something around the ag component in regards to training, building that local ag ecosystem, doing something? And so they're all great ideas, but all need more solid meat on the bone. And they're still working out some of the program details as well. And so that was where they gave us the slide overview with the caveat that they're doing updates to the website, and there will be more information coming in the next couple of weeks on the CEDD itself. So it's something we can put on the radar, and then we can determine how does it fit in with what we've identified we want to build and do.
Yeah, they did a presentation at our Sightline conference.
Yes,
Yeah,
so,
they
so,
were there
so.
on Saturday.
Yes, so Prairie's Can did, and Cami was here for that, you're correct. They didn't have these two programs ready to go at that time, and that was where this share meeting was focused solely on these two programs. I think Cami kind of gave us a bit of a broader overview as to what Prairie's Can does as the federal agency and some of that, and basically between her presentation and then Andrew's presentation, that was where we kind of opened the site selectors' eyes up to, wow, there's stuff 6 hours north of us yet that's still available and open for development too, right? So I think it was promoting, like doing that regional promotion, and this is where Prairie's Can is less than a year old, right? So I mean, they're really,
But I just want to tie back into what Peter had to say there in terms of how does this fit into our overall strategy? And I think one of the things that we talked about after SiteLink was developing our shovel-ready sites and business partners within the county that would be on a short list should a SiteLink provider have an investment opportunity to bring to the county. And this is where Prairie's can support or be one of the supporting factors to having that database that we talked about developing. I know you're still working on that, where we were going to, take our top 30 businesses that may have infrastructure, site, shovel-ready infrastructure, where they could become partners in an expanded process that could involve a Prairie's Can grant. So it's good to see that they're moving forward with that, but that's how it fit in with the strategic plan in terms of how we were going to develop it as a committee. And I guess in a future meeting we can discuss about where are these businesses, where are they located, and how site ready or shovel ready are their sites. Because we did acknowledge that there was from the site selector's perspective, a private business component that appealed to them as selectors.
Well, and I think one of the places the conversation has to go is that there's an educational component here that we're missing out on. The way I see it, we look at economic development, down the road, but what do we have to teach our younger generation in order for them to understand where this all has to go? And I think that builds into the communication component is that how do we get that into our younger generation, or even those of us who are not aware of a lot of the different strategies and different things that are going on that are aligning with all of this stuff. We have to be able to start putting those pieces together, and so how do we do that? And that's why I'm looking at this as a part of economic development is the educational component, which we've really not addressed.
So I would make a motion to accept this as information.
Motion accepted. Any questions on the motion? Question, all in favor?
Just checking to see whether I'm in the right place.
Motion passed.
Yeah, sorry, got my hamster spinning on the hamster wheel, but,
I'm gonna call just a 5-minute recess. Do you wanna?
sure.
For sure.
And I'm sorry,
Stop our
the,
streaming for.
that
5 minutes.
motion to accept was made by,
Myself.
thank you. Yes, just give me one moment to press pause and we'll verify.
Excuse me.
In, but I'm not quite sure how to pause here.
It's interesting that you mentioned.
We'll come back at
And it-
11 o'clock.
and
Okay.
when you talk about education, it was about education of business or
Okay.